Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. We have a very special guest with us tonight, Dylan Toh, and really can't wait to see his amazing portfolio and hear about how he got into landscape photography and where he's been, what he's done, and it's going to be an awesome show. Nick, Paul, welcome. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, really good, Luke. Thanks. Thanks for coming on, Dylan. It's going to be a great show. I've known Dylan for many years. I think we first came across each other on the Australian Photography Forum, yeah, that would have been what, 2009
or before that.
Earlier. Yeah, I reckon it was 2006 or 2007. It was quite early on, I think, mate.
Yeah,
but, I remember these beautiful landscape images coming up and go, who's this guy? Oh, gee, I like his stuff. Oh, I want to be like him. This is great.
Well, I had a similar experience, but it wasn't on the forum so much. I was more on Flickr, and Dylan was very active on Flickr, and I remember seeing pretty much every post that he put up was just a completely inspiring image to me. And I really do credit Dylan as being one of my biggest inspirations when I was first getting into photography and really feeling like, I could create beautiful landscape images because this guy could do it. So why couldn't I? And I think, I'm from Adelaide originally, and that's where Dylan's based as well. So yeah, certainly thought it was pretty cool that a local bloke could be mixing it like that. And, there's not a huge number of photographers putting out that amount from Adelaide, so it was really quite cool to see. Paul, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, good. I just fresh off the ferry from home away from home, Bruny Island, chasing by 11 lessons till 3 a.m. So I'm a little bit rusty.
Yeah,
but I came across Dylan's work a long time ago as well, and what struck me also is here's someone who just breezes through Tasmania and all of a sudden just comes up with this kick-ass portfolio of work, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I haven't got images like that, and this is my backyard. It's like, what's going on? And just such a refined approach with long exposures and really making the most of glass filters, and which I've always been pretty lazy about myself. And Dylan's mastery at it is so apparent, and the way it comes through in his imagery really consistently just shows a real commitment to and it brings a real style to Dylan's work, I think, which really makes it stand out and have its own presence. And as we've just alluded to, it's been a presence that's been around for a very long time, actually. How do you look so young? What's going on?
Maybe I am very young. Well, thanks so much.
That came out wrong, but you're looking very young and fresh, put it that way.
Age is all a state of mind, I'll put it that way. But yeah, thanks for the compliment, Sarah. But referring back to Flickr and Oz Photography, I think credit goes to the environment, all of those places, because I got so much help from Flickr in the early days from even people like Ryan Dyer, and so forth. He was around during those times as well, and I just kind of reached out to some of those guys who in the Pacific Northwest whose work that I was trying to emulate with local scenes and so forth. But the whole Flickr community back in 2006-07 was extremely supportive, and I think without a lot of the negatives that come from social media these days. So it was kind of a win-win situation. And the Oz Photography Forum that Nick and I were a part of, that was an excellent place to just post an image and get constructive feedback and involve yourself in competitions where people weren't, subject to some of the complaints that people make now about competition. So it was all very kind of a supportive environment. And, you guys are all people I've admired and work and I've liked to emulate as well. So I'm glad it's a two-way street.
Well, that's very cool to hear.
Yeah.
Indeed. And so maybe just take us all the way back to, when you first started really getting into photography and what created that spark. Can you think of a defining moment perhaps or a trip that you did?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think when Marianne and I first got together back in 2001, we liked to travel a lot. And so we used to just try and make the most of our trips in terms of the things we did. But then when we came back, we were, I guess, sometimes a bit disappointed with the inability to bring back, visual memories. So we kind of worked on our photography more for us to kind of bring back, really good representations of what we saw, how we felt at the time, and so forth. So that was kind of what drove us into doing photography. And we initially tried film photography, but the learning curve for that was really steep. And at the time as well, I didn't have a lot of available time because I was training as a junior doctor. And so we'd often be working like 110-hour fortnights plus at times, and then only getting a few weeks of leave a year. So you really had to make the most of your leave. So I guess growing up with that kind of environment, it just made me try to focus whenever I was out to kind of make the most of whatever I was doing at the time. So that was one aspect of it that made it challenging in the early years, but we did go to a lot of places and don't have a lot of pictures to show for it. I've got diaries of it, so that's a good kind of memory, but the visual stuff was always important to us. And somewhat embarrassingly, Marianne and I also fell victim to World of Warcraft.
Time-sucking vortex.
Yes. What was that, Paul?
Time-sucking vortex.
Yeah, that's right. So we were in it from 2004 to 2008. And during those 4 years, you can log on to your account and see how much playing time you've had. And in those 4 years, it was 1 year of playing time. So we were online for 6 hours a day. So it would be like get back from work, jump on the computer, play World of Warcraft, and then on the holidays go shooting like mad, really.
Wow.
And in between, once we started to ditch the World of Warcraft habit, and once I became more senior, and particularly when I finished all my training in 2008, and we ditched the World of Warcraft thing entirely, all of a sudden there was so much more time to devote to actually trying to work on photography. So you talk about a moment where photography really kicked off for us and we wanted to take it more seriously. It's probably around the end of 2007, start of 2008, where we all of a sudden had more time and ability to travel because more leave as a consultant as well. And just having, weekends free freed me up so much to just travel locally and then start to look more afar distantly. And so that's really the origins of things. And I thought maybe I'll just go through some of the early pictures, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
please do.
that's all right.
Absolutely.
Cherry poppers.
Yeah, so you've always been really a team with the photography, certainly from the early times. Did you sort of set out with that goal?
Yeah, we did. We always wondered about whether or not we would end up doing photography as at least a part-time profession, if not full-time. But I guess the conflict for me is that, I do like my job as a doctor as well, so I didn't want to give that up. And also, as we started doing things like getting involved with publications, trying to get a sustainable income from photography, we started doing things that weren't necessarily the aspects of photography that drove us to keep wanting to do it. Things like weddings, pet photography, putting up stock photography and so forth. All of those things, I guess, are important for income to sustain what you really like doing. But in the end, I think, fortunately, being a doctor with the earnings you get, it's able to fund a lot of these trips and the equipment that you need without us having to worry too much about that side of things. And so it just kept the headspace free to just focus on photography and those particular trips that we took in order to maximize the potential for not only seeing things but photographing things as we went along as well.
This image definitely brings back memories, just even from the era when you put borders around your pictures.
Yeah, that's right.
You posted them on Flickr or something.
Yeah, they all had borders. They all had watermarks because I thought I was obsessed with people trying to steal pictures and so forth. But nowadays it's much less of a concern. But
so a healing brush would take care of that in about 5 seconds, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so, exactly.
Could you tell us a bit about the Everlook name and where that may have come from, and just some thoughts about why you use that, I suppose.
This is very embarrassing too. It might provide a laugh. So in World of Warcraft, there is a beautiful city in a place called Winter Spring, where the capital city is called Everlook. It's a snow-clad city in the mountains. And so we thought, oh, that's a cool name. Why don't we use Everlook as a really representative for
never would have picked that, Dylan. Never would have picked that.
No, that's right. So if you look up Everlook in World of Warcraft, you'll see the online landscape that it is, and it's a snowy kind of winter wonderland. So those are the places we always wanted to try and visit and experience. And so it was a kind of a notional goal to go those places. And so why not name ourselves that?
And I guess because yourself and Marianne were a team, very much so, it's appropriate to use a name rather than, put both your names. It's a bit clunky and that kind of thing. It's a lot easier just to sort of merge both your outputs under one, I guess, brand as it was.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know whether or not it worked to our advantage, but we've certainly liked the name and stuck with it ever since. So
yeah, it's cool. A beautiful, snowy digital village.
Yes, it is.
Just looking on images now.
Yeah, with a magenta hue.
Very much.
It's magenta. Yeah, right.
It's very magenta. It's almost like they've stacked two Koken filters.
That's right. I did use Kokens for a long time.
Yeah, so did I, until I stacked two of them together and realised it wasn't good.
No, and you get this really bad purple cast.
Yep.
So this image is from Cerro Torres in Patagonia, and we actually went there for our honeymoon. And at the time, we weren't particularly, I guess you'd call, seasoned solo travelers. So we did a lot of tours with companies like Intrepid and so forth, but they were certainly not catering to being at locations for photographic experiences. Like, in order to get to here, we were staying way out, not even anywhere close to this. So there's no way that as part of the tour group you could get out there at dawn without kind of leaving in the middle of the night solo to do it. So that, I think our emphasis more at the time was just photographing wherever he went, rather than trying to look at conditions in order to try and get the best image out possible. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot of HDR photomatics elements in that picture. I've kept it quite small, but it certainly was a phase where I went through using HDR to try to bring out dynamic range. But also at the time, I tried to then do something, I guess, that was a little bit different at the time, and that is to blend in part of the original image with the HDR image to make it look more real. So that was one of the things that we dabbled around with all the time, kind of merging the automated software with actual photograph skills. So you guys would recognize this. So in 2008, in December, we walked through the overland track for the second time. So I think we've done it in total 3 times now. This is the second time when there were blizzard conditions in December, which was the first kind of Australian snow that we'd experienced in a while. And on the plateau heading towards Barn Bluff and around behind Cradle, we were kind of waist deep in snow. So that was a really kind of awesome experience, if not a bit hypothermic, but we got through that okay. And the rest of the trip was more or less in blue skies. So I guess that demonstrates we tried to do a lot of multi-day hikes all over the place, including Tasmania, China, New Zealand, and so forth, and trying to get used to photographing while on those trips and carrying the right equipment was, I guess, something that we gradually learned to do, to pack the right things. To the point where, in the most recent trip, I've probably felt the most comfortable in 2019 on my last kind of backpacking trip. But at the time, it was, we had poor tripods, poor weather equipment. It was really quite painful to go out in those conditions and try and shoot back then. Whereas now, I have much more faith in the gear and the abilities I have to go out in those kind of conditions.
Yes, it's improved a lot too, just over the years too. So that's a bit of a double whammy, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I remember in preparation for this talk, I started going through some of the old raw files from the shots I took, say, in Iceland with the 7D. And basically any shot I took at over 200 ISO was pretty much unusable. Like the amount of noise on 400 ISO it's just incredible in the 7D.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, by modern standards. So in 2009, that was our first trip to Iceland. And at that time, I think it was pretty much an unknown location. It certainly wasn't on our radar photographically. And how we got to traveling to Iceland was Marianne and I at the time had got married in 2007. And we thought, well, at some stage, we're going to start thinking about having a family. So where can we go that's going to be the furthest from Australia possible, that's going to be hard to take kids? And if you look on the globe, Iceland's kind of directly opposite Australia. So we just said, well, what's in Iceland? And started doing some Google image searches, and it looked pretty wild, but not a lot of fine art type landscape photography. So we thought, why don't we try Iceland at the time? And it was remarkable. So we went there. We basically, in the month of April, May, we basically had the whole countryside to ourselves. There were hardly any kind of overseas visitors. And anywhere we went, we would almost be assured being the only photographers there.
Wow.
Even somewhere like Seljalandsfoss or Skogafoss, there were no other photographers there.
And that's a busy time too nowadays. I mean, the closer to the summer you get, it normally gets busier and busier. So that's saying something.
And how was your? Well, I guess you would have been in social media then. And how was your Facebook Everlook account going at that stage?
So I reckon so I think 2008 was a key moment we decided to really push photography in our lifestyle. But I think post our 2010 trip was when all the social media stuff really kicked off with the backlog of images from there. So we had the Facebook Everlook page, and I reckon between the years of 2010 to 2012, when there were no algorithms and basically it was all organic reach, because not a lot of people had been to Iceland, there was so much interest in that. And so that's when it really kicked off from 0 to 200,000 and stayed around that mark now.
So you're the responsible for the Iceland influx of photographers? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I think I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of getting at. I was leading up to it. I was wondering if it was something that you had thought about, because I think given your presence on places like Flickr and Facebook at that time, you'd have a fair, a small amount of credit for sending a lot of photographers over there, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some of the Pacific Northwest photographers like Sarah Marino say that some of Marianne's images inspired her to go there and so forth. So I don't know how widespread it is, but I guess all we do know is that before we went to Iceland, we weren't seeing a lot of fine art photography from there. Then as the years progressed, it gradually became a photographic hotspot. But that may have been natural progression of social media and people sharing stuff too. So
very likely.
Yeah. We could take some of the credit, but not too much.
I'm sure there's plenty of other people finding it at the same time and doing similar things. So
yeah. Actually, that's a bit backwards. This is 2008. We visited China a couple of times, and I don't know if you guys have heard of this place called Tscharke, but it's in Sichuan. It's really, I guess, a version of Plitvice in Croatia that in autumn is really stunning with the lakes and the fall colors there. So it's a place that I would love to go back, but being in China, the major problem you had was dealing with crowds, even in a national park like that. So really remarkable scenery, but you almost had to plan a route that was, I guess, contrary to what normal people would do. So start off at the places people would usually finish up at in order to make sure you were kind of as people-free as possible for some of these shots. And we also did a trip to Yunnan province, which was an amazing experience. So we hired a driver and they just took us around. I mean, the driver was a bit dodgy, but the places we got him to take us to were pretty amazing. So this is really bordering on the Tibetan border. So Kawakapo is a 7,000 meter mountain, and we shot that from a location that was kind of a village that was 4,000 meters altitude. So very nice stuff. And the rice terraces in the southwest almost gave a complete different, I guess, a different climate. This is kind of almost tropical bordering Vietnam. So just within the one province in China, such contrasting weather conditions. And if you had time to explore China, you could get like the whole array of different landscape opportunities. But I think my impression that it's increasingly hard to travel there, not only with COVID, but political situation and so forth. So at the time, I think a lot of these pictures probably went by unnoticed, maybe except on Flickr where I was posting them. But they weren't, this is pre-2010 trip. So I think most of these pictures are largely unseen, except for readers of Oz Photography magazine, where they featured an article on Yunnan.
This I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but also the resolution we're looking at these is representative of the size of uploads back in the day as well.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So I think at the time I used to upload images no greater than 1024 long edge. But now I just keep it at 2048, and so on a typical HD screen it's big, and on a full HD screen, on a 4K screen, it kind of looks okay as well.
Yeah.
How big do you guys kind of upload these days?
2048.
Yeah.
Go to.
Yeah, it's about that. If I can get away with smaller, I will. The smaller the better, in my opinion. But you sort of trade off, I suppose. Yeah.
I'm still way back at low resolution generally. I'll do 1,000 for a vertical and 1,200 for a horizontal.
Oh yeah.
And it's I go 1080 on the short edge normally is what I do.
I'll do 1,000 long edge and 1,200 long edge, depending if it's vertical or horizontal. But that's just the choice that I've made. And on a phone, which most people are looking at, it's
exactly.
When I show stuff on this show, I'll usually go and chuck a few through an action on Adobe so they look a bit better. But I try to keep them small, and I've still got this thing about image theft, which is people say it's probably not something you need to worry about so much. But you'd have a lot of experience in people ripping off your stuff. I'm pretty sure over the years you've had a lot of websites nick your stuff and use it for travel sites and all sorts of things, haven't you?
Yeah, so I think I used to expend a lot of energy with every single one, but then I realized that probably 90% of them are just people trying to get famous quick, and they don't have any kind of actual, like, most of the people aren't really photographers themselves earning an income or anything like that. They're just trying to rip other people's photos off and put up on a site to get likes, basically. So I didn't, in the end, I didn't end up following those. But if a commercial site used one, then Marion and I would definitely do a please explain. And maybe if we were feeling particularly brave about it, we'd just send them an invoice, basically. So it's a bit disappointing when big companies do it, but my view is that if I'm going to put anything up on Instagram at that resolution, I don't mind if people share it on a as long as they do appropriate acknowledgements and so forth. But if they're going to use it for websites for commercial gain and things like that, that's the kind of line I've drawn for myself as to that's a no-go.
Yeah. And look, it was an early back 2010 sort of time. It was a fairly early one for copyright infringement. People weren't really sure how it worked, and I think there's a lot more education now, and a lot more people are aware of that you can't just rip off other people's images. But sort of back then it was a bit wild westy.
And a lot of people were downloading music as well, so sort of had a bit of a culture on there of just sort of downloading things bootlegged and all sorts. So I think can sort of understand that
that kind of mentality. So I guess we'll move on to Iceland in 2010. Yes. So after our first trip in 2009, where we spent 2 weeks there, we were quite frustrated because basically none of the roads to the interior had opened. They were still all iced over. And we did want to see the interior where possible. And so, this coincided with 10 years of me having worked at the Royal Adelaide. So we had long service leave up our sleeve. So we basically planned a 3-month holiday, and 5 weeks of that were in Iceland, where we tried to.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a 3-month holiday. A lot of focus on hiking and photography, and so 5 weeks in Iceland consecutively was just a real bonus. And the difference between 2009 and 10 was substantial. Wow. Even in that 1 year, perhaps it was the season, because we went there at the end of August, so it's kind of late summer. So there were a lot more people around than in autumn, which was when we went the first time. And, starting to be a few more photographers there as well. But, even 2010, places like Kirchhoffel, we had that to ourselves still, even back then. So this image is taken from Landmannalaugar, which is the 4-day hike, which can extend to 5 or 6 days through the interior highland. It's one of the highlights. It takes you through all this rhyolite volcanic hills and through kind of ashen, barren desert type landscapes, all the way through to the volcano that erupted when that was later in the year, I think. There was a volcano eruption there that disrupted flights for many weeks there.
The unpronounceable name.
Yeah, it starts with an E, that one.
Yeah, I've forgotten it. It's on the Fim. Yeah, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it.
that volcano will do.
Yeah, that's right. So look, I have to show some of Marianne's pictures, because I think she got, if I'm going to be honest, I think Marianne has a lot more raw artistic talent than I do. She's able to kind of go between mediums, whereas photography for me is like a one-trick pony. I cannot do anything with any other medium of art whatsoever, whereas she can certainly go in between. So this is a shot of Godafoss taken during the day. And one, I guess, a comical aspect of this, that we weren't using a lot of G&D filters stacking for long exposures. So we used to just carry like a black or used credit card and just do the card trick. So just for this shot, if it was 1 minute, we just hold the card at the top for 30 seconds of it and then gradually lift it off, and you've got your G&D simulated exposure there. So
I have actually never heard of that.
Oh, you never have? Yeah, it's good fun. It's really good fun, because you can simulate any G&D you like in any direction, if you just, depending on the way you lift it off and how quickly and how long you hold it on for. Yep. So if you got a 90-second exposure and you want a 3-stop block at the top, you just calculate it and hold it there for the whole time.
I've only ever done that once. I used it once when there was some laser beams that were in the sky, maybe 7 or 8 years ago here in Hobart, and I wanted to do a shot from the eastern shore that had a foreground and then had the laser beams. But because they moved reasonably frequently, I didn't want to expose the foreground for the 30 seconds that it needed and have those moving. So I held a black card on the top of the image, and I just sort of slightly moved it up and down a bit so I'd blur the edges.
Yeah, that's right.
And it didn't end up with a black line. So you got to sort of move it a bit while you're doing it.
That's right. You just juggle it and then slowly.
And then for the last maybe 3 seconds of the exposure, you whip it off and expose the top part of it. And also the city was a lot brighter than the foreground, so that worked well. But it's the only time I've ever bothered doing that.
Yeah. No, I think it was just fun doing stuff on the field. I wouldn't recommend it as a good way to do it, but if you, for instance, forget your G&Ds or your holder kit or something,
or smash it.
Yeah, that's right. I have smashed many filters, including.
I've seen you lose a polarizer once, and you weren't too happy about it.
No,
rolled down Mount Sirius or something like that.
Yeah. Having sprung out before I could catch it. Yeah,
that was a saga.
I don't even own one, I don't think.
Yeah. So I think this is the shot of Marianne's that is probably one of my all-time favorites that between the two of us we've taken. It was such a treat to experience this as well, because you don't really see such prolonged horizontal light here in Australia. Basically, this was taken in about August or so that there was really there were like maybe 3 hours of darkness. So that sunset, we went around chasing light for maybe 2 hours of it being something like this the whole time.
Yeah, wow.
And so, yeah, so I was to the left of Marianne taking my versions of this, but this is definitely the pick of the compositions and the light. And I think this is an image that I reckon she put in a better photography competition way back in the day and did really well with that.
Yeah, I remember that you're getting a good result with this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it that around near the Snaffles Nest area, up near however you say it, up near
No, this is actually in the West Fjords area.
Okay.
So it's near the top of the West Fjords, in a place called Onunda Fjord, I think. So it's just south of Isafjord. I'm not sure if you know where Isafjord is.
I haven't actually been up in the West Fjords. It's one area that I hope to get to one day, but yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it actually amazes me why there haven't been more people going up there, because it is amazing. And if we were to go back to Iceland, I'd certainly want to spend a fair bit of time exploring more of the West Fjords area.
I think it's probably, it just doesn't have some of the iconic landscapes that everyone wants to see, but that's probably all the more reason to go there.
Yeah.
I reckon this is the shop that launched 1,000 photographers.
Yeah, maybe.
I reckon a lot of inspiration there for a lot of people.
I was literally talking to someone who made an offer this morning about taking me to Iceland, and he's asked me when to go. Like, oh, when do you want to go? And I was like, oh my God, I don't really know. And he was looking at maybe the early summer to autumn block. Do you sort of?
I think autumn is not great because they're just. Hang on. Well, no, sorry. The first time we went was in their spring. So spring's not good because the snow melt means everything's just brown.
Right.
So I reckon the best time to go would be. This is casting my mind back to 12 years ago now, bearing in mind, but when you can access the interior and when you potentially have the ability to shoot aurora as well. So end of summer, early autumn, I think is a really good time.
That's end of August, right? That's
that's right.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. Based on I've been there in September and also in March, and September, and it's also in the shoulder season too, so you're not getting as many tourists coming through. Still, only downside is you don't have any residual snow, so if that's what you're looking for, then that might be why it's better to go the other way.
But the fall colors are pretty striking with the mossy areas as well, so it's a bit different to your typical alpine type scenery, because I think the tallest trees in Iceland, I can't remember that they have a saying there about the tallest tree, but they're not very tall trees. Hardly any trees there at all.
Serena was joking about that when we had her on the show last time.
So this is, most people recognize this as Tscharke now, but now the difference is you probably see a lineup of photographers. So we had a whole summer's evening to ourselves, just experiencing the glorious sunset without interruption. So it's in some ways it makes me a bit loath to want to go back there, because we have these kind of almost precious memories of it being an isolated country that was uninterrupted.
I went from 2014 to 2018, and that when in 14 there was no car park there, and then by 18 there was a bitumen car park and full walkways and rope off sections, and I don't think it'll destroy your memories if you did that.
Probably. I mean, even between 2009 and 10 on Skogafoss, there weren't the stairs there in 2009. You just had to, if you wanted to go on that trail that went up there, you just have to make your way up that hill.
Well, so. Hope you didn't slip down yet. Wow.
No. And yes, Jökulsárlón, which we shot in our last morning in Iceland, which that was a pretty magical scene. So we have to give a lot of credit to Orvar Atli. I don't know if have you heard of Orvar at all, Luke?
No.
No, he was our first contact there, and he made a lot of recommendations on our trip. So we really owe a lot to him for helping us plan this trip. And he was joking to us about wanting to see, post-sunset light and mist over Jökulsárlón. And then on the last morning, he just left the day before. And we got this on our last morning. So that was good fun. But once again, no other photographers there, which I think for Jökulsárlón would be an absolute miracle these days.
Mm.
So that's a representation of the Iceland stuff. And then Scotland is a country we'd really love to get back to as well. I think these days I tend to focus more on natural landscapes rather than man-made things. And I tend to try and keep people out of the shots as well. But back then, I think I had a much more inclusive approach to photographing anything related to landscapes. So this is Eileen Donan Castle, and another one of Marianne's shots, because she nailed a composition better than I did at the scene. So I'll just keep showing her picture. But I really, part of me really, I've been encouraging Marianne to get back into it, because I show her these old pictures and say, you were so good at it, but she doesn't have the passion to do it. And I think if you don't have the passion to do it, it becomes an uphill battle.
Mm. Mm.
Another, I guess, a famous scene from Scotland, the Quirang. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That's how you spell it.
Yeah.
This is a scene from one of the movies at the time that we really liked, called Stardust. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was
rings a bell, but
Claire Danes. She was a comet or something like that. But anyway,
No, I missed that one.
very like
kind of a kids fantasy one, like
no, probably an adult one, but rom-com kind of fairy tale setting.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna get mixed up.
And then this is another iconic location at the time, which we knew about, which is Elgol. So on the Isle of Skye, which is just remarkable for landscapes if the weather plays ball. So we had a lot of rainy days in Scotland, which is to be expected, but the times where it did brighten up were simply amazing. I don't want to try pronouncing some of the Scottish Munro names. I think this is Bain Alligan. So the twin horns of Bain Alligan. So I think if I went to Scotland now, the difference in my approach between then and now was that my goal in Scotland was to just a Munro bag. So in Scotland, they try and get up as many. I think it's similar to able bagging.
Ables, yeah.
Yeah, so Munro's the Scottish equivalent, and I tried to get up as many as I could and took the camera up with me. Whereas if I were to visit Scotland now, I reckon I'd probably be heading up the slopes of this in the middle of the night and waiting for dawn for light. So at the time, that was kind of even that was kind of secondary to just being up to the top. So then we moved on to Nepal for part of our 3-month trip, and we took a lot of people shots in Nepal, because the people there are just so friendly, and it was just really, it's so refreshing to see a lot of the impression I got was of very happy and satisfied people despite not having much at all, really, particularly in the mountain villages. And so this was shot in Kathmandu's Durbar Square, which I think had some damage with the earthquakes.
Yeah,
in years to come.
It has quite significant damage, unfortunately, and it's not really a patch on what you see there, unfortunately. But hopefully they'll gradually rebuild it all.
Yeah,
A lot of pigeons.
I've spoken to a couple of doctors who've come over to us from Nepal, and they constantly criticize the government for not having done anything basically to repair the damage. So that's a bit sad, but I guess a good memory to have seen it before it was damaged. And just all these happy kids in the mountains running up to us asking for pencils and things like that, so just a completely different frame of mind.
What did you do? Did you do a walk there, Dylan, or is there?
What's that? Sorry.
Did you do a particular walk there, or?
So we've been to Nepal. I've been there 3 times now, but the second time we went was in 2006 on the Everest Base Camp trek, and for this particular one, we did the Annapurna Base Camp trek. Yeah. So the trouble with the hikes in Nepal was that Marianne's not very good with altitude. And I also struggle as well with the diuresis. I'm up all night peeing. And so it's just very, very tired, I guess, by all of that. So to go out and take pictures was something on top of that. So this shot's taken from Poon Hill, which is on the Annapurna sanctuary track, heading up the middle. I'm not sure if you went there, Luke, as part of the circuit.
we had fresh powder snow up there. It was just one of the highlights of many years. I think it was so beautiful up there. Yeah.
It just looks
Yeah.
so immense. Like,
Yeah, so
Hard
when
to
you're
fathom.
in the Annapurna Sanctuary in the base camp, you're basically at 4,000 meters with a ring of mountains that are 7,000 meters plus. So it's just simply amazing. And from memory, I think that's Annapurna South, which is a 7,000 meter plus mountain.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and I can't
That's
remember the
fish
name of
tail,
that. Yeah, Machu Picchu.
Picchu, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
say
it
Machu
looks
Picchu.
different. It looks different from a lot of different angles. So this one kind of dominates the walk as you're walking up through the sanctuary. So
yeah, we didn't see
good.
that much on. I did the Annapurna circuit, and you don't see it so much on there, but certainly the back end of the walk, it's a big feature.
Yeah. And so this shot was taken from Annapurna Base Camp, or thereby nearabouts, looking at another angle of Annapurna South, which is that 7,000 meter mountain. But all around, you've got these gigantic mountains. And I think what stopped me taking more photos was that in the middle of the night, Marianne was not well and had to be rushed down. So she started kind of vomiting and being a bit disoriented. So, but the amazing thing was that in the middle of the night, all we did was go down maybe 50 to 100 meters of elevation. So it wasn't that far from this particular spot, but she was significantly better. And we basically grabbed all the blankets from the hut that was there and sleeping bags and spent a night under the stars in sub-zero conditions with no cover. So it was an interesting experience, very, very cold. But a bit scary as well. But I think we'd have to think twice about whether or not she comes on these high altitude expeditions anymore. But certainly there's opportunity for a lot more images to be taken from there. And maybe one day we'll take the kids and see what their altitude tolerance is and take it from there.
Did you take something like Dimox or anything like that? I mean, I don't know if as a doctor that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, so Diamox, a bit of a, I guess I could diverge medically a little bit there. So what Diamox does is that when you're up that high, sometimes your body does a weird thing called apnea where you stop breathing, and that can get you in trouble. So Diamox changes your acid balance in the body, so you hyperventilate, so it prevents that those apneic episodes. So it helps symptom-wise, but it doesn't help the underlying problem of you not being tolerant of the altitude. So Diamox is a bit of a cover-up job. So it's actually, it could potentially be dangerous if you're just covering up symptoms. So I didn't take any while I was up there, partly because I was just peeing all the time anyway, and it's a diuretic. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I couldn't bear the thought of going any more than once every hour.
I remember the guides we had had the saying water is medicine, because you just the amount of water that you drink in the altitude and how bright and sunny it is. Yeah, it's
insane.
Such an incredible place. I'm so glad to see some images of it, and the prayer flags flapping in the wind it takes me back.
Yeah. I mean, you went even higher. You went up through the pass at 5,000 plus, didn't you?
Yep. That was a very interesting day.
Yeah. Because this spot's only at 4,500, so it's
still pretty close.
Yeah.
Is that one of the highest points of the trek then?
That is the highest point
that's
of the sanctuary.
Yeah. It's still pretty close. Yeah. Wow.
So that really concluded our big 2010 trip of 3 months, and we had a huge kind of backlog of images to go back and process when we came home. And I think really that's when the Everlook photography presence started to boom on the back of all these images that we took during the 3 months. And at that point in time, we thought, look, we've had our big adventure. It's time to start trying for a family. And I don't know if you call it fortunate or unfortunate, but it was instant. So we got back, and then literally 10 months later, Charlotte was due.
Wow.
So we didn't have much time to do more mucking around with the two of us, but that was good. So our next trip in 2011 was while Marianne was 4 or 5 months pregnant, and that was to Tassie again, just for a week. to drive around, have a bit of a last a fling before the kids came along. But from that trip, once again, I think Marianne took a couple of, we got a couple of images which I would rate as some of our favourites still. And I know this picture of Holes Falls was one that was on the back cover of the Tasmania Visual Journey book. So
still one of my favourites from there.
Yeah, I love that. I reckon it's definitely one of the best.
I don't think I've seen a better one of that place ever.
It's
and you know what? I didn't. This is the strange thing about photography back then. If you were to say how I came across this shot in 2021, I would say I'd seen some images of it. I just wanted to come and see what it was like and try and get my own original version of it. But the reason we came across this falls was we basically wanted to stop in between Cradle Mountain and St. Helens, and we just saw a sign that said Holes Falls, and we drove off and walked down and explored it. And I wasn't prepared. I went in barefoot to take this shot, got a few leeches for what it was worth, and came up with this image. So this was just pure luck, and just out of just for the fun of exploration that got this image.
It's a beautiful shot. I love it.
Yeah. And then another one of Marianne's shots that I think it's got a legacy now, I guess, because that tree's no longer there. Yeah. But I think I can certainly say that I was inspired to come here by some, I think Matthew Stewart and Kane Gladhill, they'd taken a few shots of this particular
Mel
tree.
Sinclair as well.
And Mel, so they'd all been here and taken shots of that tree. So it was on my radar as to where to take it. But Marianne is completely different in terms of her social media presence. So a lot of these places is an interesting experiment for us because she hasn't seen anything from there. And so she's just come and taken pictures as she's seen fit without any prior knowledge. And so this is one of our favorite shots that she got from the trip. And it's turned out to be, I guess, a shot that may have perhaps influenced other people to go there as well, based on our social media presence.
The tree's already looking, you can see how bedraggled it is back then. So it's
this is 2011.
Hang on for another 10 years after that.
Yes.
So
So and then we also did another short trip to Melbourne, and I guess I wonder if this segues a little bit into talking about competitions and things, but this shot of the Pinnacles is a long exposure pano that we took just during a weekend away, where Marianne was literally kind of 8 months pregnant or 7.5 months pregnant, so she couldn't really do much walking there at all. But yeah, this image did well in the Pano comp, got the top 50, it then got me a judging stint in 2014 in the amateur section. And one thing I guess a plug for the Pano Awards, it was kind of the bridge between the more natural photography competitions, which was Anzac at the time. Because I think Anzac at the time were very strict in terms of what they what they saw as admissible in terms of degree of post-processing. And then there were the other competitions like Better Photography that focused a lot on manipulation and the artistic side of it. So I always saw the Pano Awards competition as a kind of happy medium in between, which is where my kind of niche of photography sits as well, I think. So a bit more real than real, but not completely fantastic and primarily art inspired. So so I think every year it's been a good fit to submit my images there. That's the kind of competition that I'm most comfortable kind of submitting images to.
It's probably a worthwhile segue just talking about your style, Dylan. A lot of people that wouldn't have seen your work before are probably thinking that they're quite saturated images, and it's your style that you've had from go to woe, and you're still producing, really colourful images. And you've probably had some criticism over the years from people that go, "Oh, that's too saturated," and that sort of thing. What's your theory and thought on your style and the way you present your work?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to why I go out and photograph these conditions. So the exploration side of things is definitely one, but I kind of go out there shooting, hoping for brilliant light, because you know, it's really I find it really therapeutic to be out there. And you would have seen all my debris backyard shots. So anytime there's a hint of colorful light, I'm out there no matter where I am. It's just it's like I'm a bee attracted to that kind of color. So it's the kind of thing that makes me happy, and it makes me happiest to shoot that kind of thing and present it. So I'm usually looking for conditions that represent that these days. And so, you know, I do appreciate the moodiness of other people's images, or even in my own images when the conditions suit, but it's not my primary drive in terms of what I'm going out to shoot. It's really to go out and get a contrast to maybe some of the more depressing things that you might see at work and so forth, and just balance it out with a bit of euphoria that comes through nature. So, you know, walking in lush, bright green forests, walking in, you know, really red granite rocks that are glowing in sunset light, those kinds of things really drive me to head out there. And when I do present the images, that's the kind of feeling I want to convey in them as well. So it's I've always considered myself as an accidental artist, as in what I mean by that is, you know, if people want to consider the images I produce as art, that's fine by me, but I'm not actually looking to consciously create art. I just want to create something that's a representation of what I saw, how I felt. And if it just so happens that people appreciate it as art, then it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Great way of looking at it. And one thing I'd add to that too, Dylan, I have noticed that you shoot a lot with a polarizer as well, and that's often, you know, going to add a lot more saturation to the images as well. So I do feel like that's an added feature as well to your style, as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the circular polarizer only leaves the camera on selected occasions. Like if I'm shooting into direct light and I want as little glass there as possible, or if the CPL is blocking too much light and so forth. So, but generally speaking, I'm trying to find a polarizer that really brings out the colors without creating a cast. And I think the latest Nissi versions probably have got that pretty much right.
Which one's that? Is that, it's not the landscape one? There's a new
No,
one?
I didn't like that one.
Yeah.
Because that one made things too cool.
Yeah, it adds that adds a bit of blue to snow and things like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and blue to water, which is a real negative for me, because, you know, if I'm shooting a lot of waterfalls and things, I don't want to have to be correcting blue casts on the water side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got the landscape version of it because it came with the kit that I bought.
Yeah.
I really like with Nissi the screw-on aspect. I was doing things really weirdly with trying to fit graduated filters on a screw-in polarizer. But and it was a pain in the butt. And I put up with it for years, and then I saw everyone using these Nissi holders, and there are lots of options, not just Nissi, out there now that have, you know, magnets and all sorts of stuff. So I'm certainly not suggesting Nissi are necessarily the best solution, but they were one of the more innovative companies, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, coming up with solutions that others hadn't at the time. But I have found that the landscape polarizer does really bring out the saturation, and you can actually see it. I can tell when I started using it, because some of my images are probably more saturated than they have been previously, and sometimes I have to wind that back, particularly for forest shots.
You get the kind of toxic greens starting to
and I'm wondering if maybe I should change to a different one, and see how I go with that. So you reckon the new one's a bit
the new one's much more
severe?
Yeah, much more neutral, and even the old one pre-landscape, that gave a slight warming cast, which is definitely a preference over a cooling effect for me. But yeah, so I think the new one's probably the best one. I can't comment on other brands because I haven't used them, unfortunately, but I'm sure that other brands have equivalent filters that are relatively neutral.
And you're a Nissi ambassador, is that right, or were, or?
Yeah, so that I still am. That's a bit of an interesting story. So I guess you could call that a conflict of interest with some of this, but I think in 2015, if we're talking about sponsorships, it's really the only major company sponsorship that I've had over the years. So when they were starting out, they approached me through social media. And at the time, I weren't even sure if they were legit or not because I'd never heard of them.
Yeah.
So they sent me some stuff, and including the circular polarizer as part of the filter holder.
Yep.
And so that drew instant interest from me because I've been struggling like you, trying to do CPLs and then handhold filters, and I just scratched them and the filters wouldn't last very long.
Yeah.
So that was a huge attraction, and the filters were actually really good at the time as well.
Yeah.
So I just stuck with them, and at the moment the kind of two-way relationship is that they just send me stuff whenever I've damaged and replaced things, and in return for that, if they want to use an image for like a cover in one of their boxes or something, I just let them have it if I've used the filters. And also do a bit of translating for them if they for their website if they want to put up a blog post and they've got no one to translate a Chinese version of what they're doing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you do a few, you do some reviews of their gear, and obviously that it comes from a place where they're sending you stuff for free and there's a relationship. But I do appreciate, and I always watch them when you do them, because I trust you to be showing the good sides and the bad sides of everything, and anyone that's watched any of your gear reviews will know exactly what I'm talking about. You certainly don't wax lyrical about is that the right term? You certainly don't gush about the product completely. No. You'll talk about the positives and the negatives.
Yeah.
And it's really it's great that you do that, and by doing that, I know that you're also feeding back to NISI to improve their products.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
is a really good thing.
So I hope that that's why they've kept me on board, despite the not always glowing reviews of some of their stuff. Like I think one of their most disastrous products was the Horizon filter. I don't know if you guys. that was such an awful idea, but anyway, so I let them know that I think, look, who's going to use this? So I'm not afraid to. I think we've had enough time to develop a relationship where they're kind of expecting me to give them constructive feedback about their gear.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we're only in 2011, and look, a series of these shots were taken locally because this was the time when Marianne was expecting. And so we'd just be waiting, and I'd be like, I'm getting nervous. I'm just going to go out and shoot on this particular morning.
Yeah.
So this has taken at some. Adelaide's got so many jetties, so you kind of spoiled for choice as to what jetty you take. This one's not technically a jetty, but there's some pylons that stop cars going through at low tide at Moana Beach, and we get some amazing sunsets and sunrises, moonsets and moonrises. I don't know why, but we get such good sunrises and sunsets over here. And this is I haven't shot these sticks for a long time now because I haven't really been able to go out locally when I'm not on leave. But this is probably the most shot old jetty around the Adelaide area down at Port Wollonga. And there's a faint rainbow in the background on a pretty stormy morning. So that's probably one of my favorite shots, but it was shot at a moderately high ISO in the 7D. So, reproducing it to any quality is a challenge. When I go back and look at it, it's not something I want to look at. I then started to explore the South Coast, which is really amazing in terms of the ruggedness. So this is taken from a place called Petrel Cove down near Victor Harbour. Luke probably knows that.
You haven't actually shot down there, but I know through the many posts you've made from there that it's definitely a huge favourite of yours. So
yeah, that whole coastline down there is simply amazing. Potentially quite dangerous. With I've lost one or two cameras down there to water damage.
Oh, no.
Dude, that's a few.
No, one. I think it's just the one. I think the 5D Mark III had it after I got splashed with a big dump down there.
Probably worth mentioning at this point that we've done a show previously with you, Dylan, where you've given us a
Adelaide and surrounds.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And that was a really great insight into the whole area. I'm just trying to work out how
long was that Kangaroo Island exposure?
This one here, I reckon that one's probably a couple of minutes. I can't remember offhand, but this is a 2012 trip. Just a brief one locally. And once again, I guess I wonder if this segues a little bit into some of the other non-landscape stuff that we were doing at the time as well. So I might just pause that folder.
Last time I was there, they were literally filming a Bollywood movie right there.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't believe it. It was the whole music and shebang and dancers and food trucks in the car park and booms everywhere.
Wow, that's amazing. Because if you go to shoot at Remarkable Rocks, it's the kind of location that, even though it's so amazing, you're almost guaranteed to have it to yourself if you go for a dawn or a dusk shoot, just because of where Flinders Chase National Park is. You'd have to make a specific trip out there and brave the millions of wildlife on the road to get there at those hours. It's a bit sad, actually, because I went there at the end of 2020, post the big fires that were there, and I could just drive through the roads completely unscathed. I was expecting to have to dodge, echidnas, wallabies, and so forth. So
sad.
Yeah, so that was definitely a bit sad seeing all of that. But the regeneration's going pretty well from what I could see.
So that was episode 16. If anyone's interested more in the South Australian stuff, go back to episode 16.
53 episodes ago. There you go.
Yeah, a year ago. So yeah, before I got into 2012, oh, hang on, what am I doing there? You don't want to see my work stuff. What's going on? So in between, around this time was when we were deciding, look, we can't continue doing weddings because the kids were really, Charlotte in particular was taking up a lot of our time. And these guys, we shot the Adelaide Oval while it was being renovated and upgraded to its current state. So that's a bit of a historic wedding that we enjoyed with some cricket fans who timed their wedding for a Friday night so they could be back in Jamestown for the local game the next day. So, it's interesting. And part of the fun of wedding photography as well was because I was doing we were doing a lot of landscape shoots. I tried to see if I could do long exposures for wedding photography as well. So we'd often try and do stuff like this, or have the couple stand still while traffic was driving past and stuff like that as well. So I found a use for ND filters at wedding, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so how long do you reckon your wedding phase lasted?
I think we did our first one in 2009 for a couple from work, and then our last one was probably 2014. So we did it for 5 years and probably shot about 30 in total, like yourself. And before we, it really tailed off at the end though. We're probably doing about 5 or 6 a year for a period, and then it kind of settled down afterwards.
Yeah, I started about 2007 and probably went to about 2013 or 14, and yeah, I'm glad I like landscape photography. I didn't dislike the day, but I did dislike sitting on my computer having to do all that processing for very long periods of time. And
That's
probably
right.
like you probably found it got in the way of family life, and it just wasn't for me at all. I just couldn't cope with it anymore, and especially with my work being shift work, it was nerve-wracking not knowing if you were going to have the day off to shoot the wedding, and obviously you can't be unreliable. And I was never unreliable, but there were a couple of times where I had to desperately move work shifts and get people to cover for me so I could shoot a wedding, and it just became too stressful from that point of view, and too much work. But
I can definitely empathize with all of that, because we're in a similar position. Your clients can't shift their date, so it's up to you to kind of work around them. But look, as an aside as well, I've done a lot of martial arts, and I guess is one of the things I do to kind of stay fit and prevent injury at my age. And
what styles, Dylan?
I grew up mainly doing taekwondo, but I trained a lot with my brother, who's done all sorts of things, ranging from Krav Maga to BJJ and Chinese Kung Fu as well, the various styles of Chinese Kung Fu. So it's good to have cross-trained with him a lot over the years. And these days I just have a bag out the shed and get stuck with it to resolve stress. And I know a lot of the Taekwondo patterns, and they're really good to kind of do to just zone out, I suppose, and just focus entirely on something else. So for a while, that's the reason why for a while I was interested in doing fight photography, because a lot of fighting is, it follows a certain rhythm. So if you're actually into the sport, you can kind of anticipate what you think they're going to do, and maybe getting a better chance of catching those hits and things. So it was good fun trying to do some of this, but once again, like the weddings, really too time consuming to sustain. But it was another area of photography that we were into, and I guess it taught me a lot of things that you don't necessarily need to know in landscape photography, like autofocusing and flash use and so forth. So,
and it's also given you some amazing flexibility that I've seen displayed at certain times. But you've got this crazy shot of you at Karajini, is it, between two walls?
No, that one's so embarrassing. What happened with that shot was that the laptop I brought for that trip, I think it was in I can't remember which canyon, but yeah, I was doing a splits just for fun, and that on a particular conference day, the actual dedicated laptop broke down, and I had a laptop there, but then I had to go off to a clinic and not attend the conference. So they used my laptop to do the talks, but during the meal breaks, it reverted to the so it reverted to a screensaver of all the shots on the computers, and it showed like a lot of the private stuff, like me doing the splits in Karajini. So everyone at the conference has seen me kind of half nude doing the splits in Karajini. And when I came back at the lunch break, they're like, you're very flexible. I'm like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah. No, we all get exhausted watching your antics, kicking bags and shooting hoops and all that sort of thing, Dylan, on your private Facebook feed.
No, it's they're all things I do to kind of zone out, basically. I think I tend to do that after work these days as well, because particularly with the recent changes at work with COVID, it's good to just kind of completely wind down immediately after work.
And you sort of say changes with COVID, but I mean, you're very much involved in that, your work too. So it's very understandable what you must have been through over the last couple of years. Definitely need those breaks.
Yeah. All right, so
Sorry,
I'll go back to...
I stole your step sharing there. So.
No, that's all right. It would have been interesting because I was for the Australian Geographic landscape calendar a couple of years ago, they were looking for profile shots of me, and they chose one that you took from the Western Arthurs.
Oh, really?
And so I thought, I wonder which one that is. And I was hoping it wasn't the splits one, but luckily.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that too, mate.
Yeah.
Only on live,
now, Luke. Well
live
done,
shows instead.
All right. So let's get rid of that. So I can't get rid of this Teams thing. It's pretty annoying.
No, I've got the same problem.
I find Teams annoying just in general.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So look, in 2012, I guess this is where the fitting in the family started to come into play, and I guess that started to carve out a further niche for Everlook photography at the time in terms of traveling with kids. So at the time, Charlotte was 8. We hadn't done any significant travel with her. So we planned a 2-week trip through New Zealand. And basically, we tried to adjust our adventures around meal times and her nap times. And occasionally I would sneak out at dawn to try and get these shots. And I think on those early trips, Marianne and I had this working arrangement where I'd go on one overnight hike on one of these trips. So this is Roy's Peak in Wanaka. And once again, I think in 2012, I don't think there were that many shots of Roy's Peak at the time. It was just one of those things that I discovered almost by accident looking at Google Earth. and the explore function at the bottom where you can see pictures, and you've seen some people's snapshots of Roy's Peak, and I thought that looks amazing to go up, and so that's how I ended up there on a sunset, and it's every bit as amazing as the pictures portrayed them to be. I've been up there a couple of times since in snow, and it's really amazing up there, but very exposed. But I think these two shots are perhaps one of our fondest memories of landscape photography. So the shot of Lake Mackenzie, that was taken on.
It's one of my all-time faves. I think we had that on that show actually. Didn't we have all-time fave shots? And I think that was in there somewhere. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this was taken on the back of a very, very rainy Fjordland day, and everyone in the hut was completely soaked, but I had just got some, pretty solid wet weather gear, so the only person in the hut that went out shooting that evening was me. I don't think the rest of them were photographers though, and it cleared in the evening, so that's how this shot came about. But Marianne was staying down at Milford Sound, and she basically ventured out for the same sunset with Charlotte on her back to take this shot. And this became one of our most, I guess, financially rewarding pictures as well, because a postcard company called Picketeer from New Zealand picked it up for use, and they were a starting up company, and they were starting to use a lot of the fine art landscape photographies for postcards. And so that really set up a market. And so every time we went back to New Zealand, they would get a couple more pictures or designs for us, where they would pay us a commission for each postcard that was sold. And this one was by far the highest selling of all the postcards that we had through that company. Yeah. And once that company was doing really well until COVID struck, unfortunately. But at its peak, this postcard alone was probably making us about $500 a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good for postcards.
Yeah, exactly. It's just selling.
And that's the commission, not the sales.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thousands of postcards being sold.
But so you're, if I remember rightly, like with this trip too, did you say you didn't have that greater conditions, and then you just happened to get this come through? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So it was torrential rain when I started the trek. And at the time, I wasn't really much into checking weather apps and things. I just kind of go for the hike experience. And I went up to Key Summit in complete rain, and I remember doing a shot with me drawing in mountains with a texter and something like that. But Key Summit didn't work out, but this certainly did. And the following morning, it was back to being clouded out and raining again. And
the irony of that would be this would have been a short stroll from the hut probably, whereas the other one's a big walk up a mountain.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So this is literally 5, or if you were camping, this is literally on your doorstep, because the campsite's right there, whereas the hut's about 5 meters, about 200 meters back from there or something. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you can see, but there are actually some photomatics elements in this shot. Huh? So even then, I was using some photomatics to blend exposures and then put in and then blend in.
I was about that because it's incredibly evenly toned for the amount of contrast and the light that would be there.
Yeah. So yeah, I've done other versions now where I haven't used photomatics, and it actually turns out remarkably similar. So I guess if you use the tool properly, you can still get a semi-realistic kind of appearance.
Well, I think that's the HDR just had the bad rep just because of how badly people worked the files, and it was very easy to turn it to vomit very quickly on the slider there. So, and I think big part of the skill was knowing when to stop. And I always used to say it was a bit like singing. Some people were tone deaf with their use of photomatics, and it can kind of show pretty terribly in their pictures. Didn't
you process this one for the AusGeo Awards?
I did, yeah. So I reprocessed it without using photomatics and entered it. So that got in with the Mount Gould picture on that in that particular year. Yeah. So this was another shot taken from Shallow Bay on Lake Manapuri on the same trip. So another kind of overnighter spent in a rat-infested hut. That was quite an interesting experience. And later that, and I think going back to Paul's point about astrophotography, it is the one genre that I think with family life I've really cut down on significantly, just because of the fact that I'm usually wanting to try and get a hiking experience in the morning that might be a bit too difficult or challenging for the kids. And so that's my goal for the morning hike, and then I take them on a doable one during the day, which means I just need some rest time at night because I've done a couple of big hikes during the day and need to chill out a bit.
Yeah, well, you would have been on some walks with Luke, of course, and Luke doesn't work that way. If you go on a walk with Luke, you're taking photos 24 hours a day. There's no time for sleep.
Yeah, that's right.
It catches up with you, I tell you that.
It's not just walks any time, really.
It's got a beautiful amount of zodiacal light in that one too.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I was so naive when I took the shot. I didn't know what zodiacal light is. So there's actually more than that. I thought there was some kind of error with my stitching. Yeah. So I actually tried to edit it out.
Yeah, right.
So in reality, it's actually more prominent than that. I thought there was a blending.
Like a flare, yeah, right.
Yeah. So
what's the line down the bottom?
Is it a satellite maybe?
I think so, yeah. So this is one of my earliest kind of panorama stitches of Milky Ways. And I think Milky Ways, I kind of went through a phase where I really wanted to shoot the Milky Way with a lot of subjects, but after a while, and because for some reason Marianne doesn't like astro at all, with time the interest to take Milky Way images has kind of waned, and I think I've gone more for the experience of hiking to locations rather than being in particular spots for night photography.
Dylan, how many images in this pano?
I reckon this one was 13 verticals, so a lot of overlap. And I didn't
go to that location.
No, just a 13 straight verticals on a wide angle. So the stitching was a bit problematic with that.
And you're using some lighting in there by the looks?
Yeah, so every shot was I don't know how people do even lighting, but my method of doing even lighting is to grab if all I have is a torch, then I just kind of frantically wave it around and kind of dance around the place so it's as even as possible. So that was my technique for doing that. For maybe
cards and wobbly torches. These are good tips, man.
Yeah, that's right. So it would have been interesting if someone had seen me taking this series.
Are you okay, mate?
Yeah.
Somebody's
jumping torch.
Their torch.
Yeah. So that was good fun. That's Murphy's Haystacks in the Eyre Peninsula. So pretty pure night skies out there, because the closest town is Streaky Bay, which is only a couple of thousand people max, which is 50
How far is it
away.
from Streaky? Is it an hour or so? Or a bit?
No, I reckon less than that. I reckon it's about 30 minutes or so out from Streaky. Yeah.
I need to get over there when I do one of my SA trips.
Yeah, definitely. They're worthwhile set. This is the main set of boulders, but there's a lot of other interesting ones behind it as well. So lots of room for exploration.
How tall are they, out of interest?
I reckon, if I remember correctly, they're maybe about 5 meters or so.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're pretty big. These ones that in the middle are about 5 meters. I reckon I could climb on these ones if I wanted to. So they weren't, that foreground one wasn't, but they're certainly quite impressive to see in real life. And more
this one of yours.
Yeah, so this is another one that did well in the Pano Awards as well. And the unfortunate story behind that is I don't think I could ever reproduce that for print, because I had just damaged my 5D Mark III at the time, and it somehow, when it went for repairs, they set it to some kind of weird factory mode where all the images had this cross-hatching artifact. So in processing this image, I had to do so much kind of noise reduction and other things to kind of make it look kind of semi-normal. So it certainly wouldn't stand up to big print. And I would love to print it larger and have it at home, but not possible, I don't think.
Got a bit of the anti-crepuscular rays they're going to, is it?
That was amazing. I've never seen such prominent anti-crepuscular rays before, but yeah, the sunrise was going off behind, but there wasn't much to shoot from that particular angle. So,
but that natural curve in the clouds, all you really need is like a big rainbow over the subject there. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. So that's taken at Robe. And look, in 2013, we still only had the one kid, so we could still keep traveling that way. So in the mornings, I'd still go out for a shoot, and then during the day, fitting the kids in Charlotte's routine in between. And then this was taken on one of the overnight hikes, once again, done on a bit of a wing and a prayer of just looking at topography of New Zealand topo maps. So this is taken from the Lake Angeles area in Nelson Lakes National Park. So I think most people just go there and shoot the jetty down in the lake below. But if you walk up into the if you walk up into the mountains, it is simply amazing up there, and it's a go-to spot that I've been to a couple of times now, and each time it's kind of delivered something different.
Yeah, I did a bit of research when I was staying in the area, and your images popped up, and yeah, unfortunately I didn't have the time to get up there, but yeah, very inspiring. And
how long
I'm
is
sure
the
that's a
hike up
spot
there?
that it's just you're the maybe not the only person to shoot there, but it's you're definitely making your own shot with something like that. So
yeah, Paul, I think it's about, if you go up a ridge line, it's probably only about 7 or 8 k's direct, or you can go through a river route, and it's less demanding, but it takes a bit longer. It's probably about 10, 12 k's that way.
I'm eyeing up going to the New Zealand Photography Awards in Nelson. I was going last year, and COVID shut us down, and I was thinking about what I want to get up to in the area. So
yeah, I reckon this would be well worth it, because the hut there is amazing as well. And one of my most interesting experiences was a 2017 trip to this same area. So it was at the tail end of winter, and so there was still a lot of snow on the ridge. So I brought kind of mini spikes and snow mittens and stuff, so I was relatively well prepared for it and got there no troubles. And I thought I had the hut to myself, and so I spent the whole afternoon kind of chipping wood for kindling and got a fire going and so forth. And then maybe like at 10 o'clock at night, well after dark, there's a whole group of people who were really unprepared came in with, like, some of them had frostbite on their fingers and everything. And so it was just fortunate that I had the fire going, and they were able to kind of warm up and so forth. But it just goes to show, like in New Zealand, the alpine conditions can be fairly demanding, even though this is only probably at about 1,500 meters altitude or something. It's not particularly high. But yeah, certainly winter conditions there can be really rough.
Very similar to Tassie, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's a sunrise by the look of it?
Yeah, that's a sunrise. Yep.
Yeah,
and
I think I found the spot. I was just looking on the maps and going, yeah, I shot that jetty, but I didn't go anywhere else. I was there on my honeymoon, actually. And,
yeah. Well, the jetties is pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then this is really when you look past the south end of that jetty. It's at the distant far end of the shore, so you can take a water taxi to the south end and then walk up from there as an option as well.
Yeah, no, I can see it's a reasonable distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of, if I get to go back to New Zealand, definitely going to try and head back there, and hopefully the kids will be able to do that hike someday too. This is some local SA stuff, and it's just a go-to location, Madam Falls. I think we've probably shown that in the last trip, so I won't spend too much time, but it's just the yin-yang kind of it.
Yeah, I just really appreciate it for, I've heard of the falls growing up in SA, but never considered it a photography location. So to explore it and then find some conditions that really work there, and to create some work. I don't know if there'd be many other photos like this taken up there, and I'm sure it's put it on a lot of other people's radar.
Symbolism.
Yeah. That's what struck me there, because there's every time you go there, it's kind of in that pattern, but it wasn't kind of pronounced like this. And you need to get it just right, because if it's too dry and nothing's flowing and there's a lot of algae there, and if it's too wet, it just becomes a foam bath. It must be runoff or something that's containing all the surfactants, but it's just foam everywhere when it's too rough. So in late 2013, we took a trip to the US, which was our first long haul trip with the kids, with Charlotte, and Marianne was pregnant at the time. I hate to say this, but we probably introduced influenza to the area. Because we were coming out of our influenza season, and we developed temperatures while on the flight to 40 degrees. And then when we landed, Marianne, being pregnant, was particularly ill. And it's interesting because when we went to the clinic, they were just seeing her as per normal, that they assessed her, they took a swab and so forth. And then the next thing, they called her back in, they were all in their full PPE because they hadn't had a case of flu yet. And I'd just been to a conference full of 500 people in a room with no masks. So we were unfortunately probably case zero of their flu season back then. But we recovered enough after that initial rough few days to explore the Pacific Northwest. And, I think the sad thing is a lot of this was altered by the big fires that were there a few years ago as well. So this shot's of Butte Creek, which is near the Columbia River Gorge. And as you can see, like, this is late morning light with lighting up all the waterfall spray. So we had numerous crisp mornings like this where we were able to get that kind of light, which is just simply amazing to see. Like at Punchbowl Falls as well, which is where we saw, I took a longer shot of that as well, just focusing on the falls up there. And in terms of artistic side of it, I didn't even notice it, but a few people who saw the close-up shot have commented that they thought that this looks like a wolf taking a drink. So and interesting with the eye here and so forth. So an interesting kind of interpretation, but certainly not one that I actually can claim credit for seeing when I took the shot. Have you guys heard of Tula Top?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so shout out to him. He took me on this walk and showed me around the Columbia River Gorge, which is great. I haven't heard much from him lately, unfortunately.
Dylan, did you make those sort of connections through like Flickr and things like that? Like,
I reckon Tula was through Facebook, and at the time there was a Facebook photography group called Area 51, which some of you might know about. So there was a group of Pacific Northwest photographers who I guess got together for a critique group, and some other people like Karkit Jung, Dylan Gelkin, myself. I can't remember. There were a few other Aussies.
Hillary might have been in there. Maybe?
Yeah, Hillary was in there as well. And so
when you say some Pacific Northwest photographers, it was
mainly
top of the top, really.
yeah, it was like Uriah Dyers. Mark was in it for a while as well, I think, for Alex Noriega. So those kinds of names, they were in that. And I think I certainly got a lot of benefit from it because I considered myself not at the level of those guys and the imagery that they were producing. And so I think I got a lot of useful critique out of it. But I think there was a comment that I saw on, was it Jeff Murray? He made a comment, or there was a comment on his thread about some of the pictures from the recent competitions. And I think someone had said that they all look as though they're taken by the same photographer, or some of them. And I think the reason I left that group was because all the critiques veered towards a very specific style of photography. And so no matter what you produced, if you wanted to, be a little bit more colorful, be a bit more contrasty and so forth, it all veered towards a slightly less contrasty, muted kind of ethereal kind of approach, which made for beautiful photographs. But in the end, I think it's resulted in a lot of people producing almost the same type of images, where if you look at one from the other in that group, you may not be able to tell who took some of them. That may be considered a good thing because of the level of imagery that it does represent, but it's probably not a good thing if you're after, I guess, an individual style. So for that reason, I think after I started finding my feet and started knowing more about what I individually wanted to do, I kind of decided to step away from that group, but acknowledging the huge impact that they had on my ability to kind of see some of the scenes and process in certain ways.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that sort of emerging style that came out around this sort of time that we're talking about, and it's had a huge influence on landscape photography, a worldly sense at the sort of the higher end, and I call it the American style, which may or may not be fair considering
Pacific Northwest is the other one.
A very, very influential group of photographers, and it's beautiful work. There's no doubt about it, but it's had a lot of influence on other people's processing and styles and whatnot over the years, and I'm seeing it sort of to fade off a bit now.
I think the intimate landscape's taking over now.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's really, I mean, there's still elements of that kind of style within the intimate area, but I think that allows for a bit less, a bit more variation in the styles, I suppose, is my take on that. Yeah,
I think so. Look, I think I've seen a lot of photographers, I guess, progress through time, where they've gone from big landscapes to intimate to abstract and things like that. And I think we're all, I wondered whether or not, is that an evolutionary path for my photography? But in the end, sometimes when I try to take those shots, particularly if I'm trying to force it from a scene, it didn't really give me the same kind of satisfaction. And as much as I really love looking at other people's aerial shots and admire them, it's not something that I would aim to do, because I think the journey and the adventure of actually visiting an unknown location in the dark and then seeing the sun kind of light it up and then you can see what you're looking at, that kind of thing is, I guess, what drives me to have these adventures, like in this particular last Tasmania trip as a prime example. Whereas if I'm in the air, I think I'd probably be doing it primarily for photographic reasons. And for me, I think photography is only half the story in terms of why I'm doing it.
So really the adventure aspect to it and just getting out into nature is a 50% of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll show a shot from Mount Murchison earlier, but that was some pretty treacherous conditions, but I hardly took the camera out. It was great to be out there getting slammed by the conditions, but it wasn't really a photographic trip as such. So yeah, this is the Painted Hills in Oregon. And so this is another shot where it's
far
really...
inland is that?
What's that, sorry?
How far inland is that?
I reckon it's probably about 4 or 5 hours inland. Oh, so it's quite far in, yeah. Same with it's on the way to the Palouse Falls, which is very far inland in Oregon, so almost on the eastern border.
What sort of focal length was that shot at?
I reckon this was shot on my 70-200 with an extender. So it's quite a long focal length for this particular shot.
Just magnificent. All right.
It really reminds you of Mars. Yeah. Or a comical interpretation of that's Grug. We thought the whole area reminded us of Grug.
Fantastic.
So 2014, this is when it starts to get complicated family-wise. So Marianne was pregnant with this, and this was our baby moon before number 2 came, and we thought we'd really be impacted in terms of what we could do. So we went down to the Ocean Road, and Marianne, being kind of 7 or 8 months pregnant, she was still shooting at the time. She was up safe on the platform while I was down on Gibson's Beach, and it's just one of those amazing golden light experiences where everything else was dark. And then after all the light. And so later this year, on that particular year, after Jamie was born, I think really was the last trip that Marianne went out on her own, because what we used to do was, one evening she might go out for the sunset, and then the next evening I would go out and so forth. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then
did you ever kind of like go, oh damn it, she got the good one?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's like, why am I getting all the degrees? But no, she said this is taking that the Three Sisters, and I think this one's fallen down now.
Yeah,
so it's a different looking scene. So I put this up because I reckon it's one of her last dedicated shoots that she did going out specifically at sunset by herself. She's more taking pictures during the family walks now these days, or even more kind of just phone shots. So this Tonkaparuchi Beach, and
love that one. Whoa.
Yeah, this one's I don't go out to take abstract shots, but this White Cliff walkway it's I thought it was really interesting to try and make people wonder what was going on. In retrospect, it's a bit of I guess you could say it's a slightly dangerous shot, because it's basically along a series of vertical cliffs, and the tide had to be up for this particular shot to happen, because that water flowing away is not from the waterfall, it's from the receding tide. So the tide was kind of at the cliff face, but it was receding. So I knew that, you know, I wasn't going to keep getting more submerged. So I had done some.
What's the vertical light in the center?
That's a waterfall. Yeah, so that's a small.
It was a shaft of light or a waterfall.
Yeah, so that's it's a waterfall, and that's all in along that series of cliffs. Anytime there's a small waterfall, there's all this amazing kind of algae on the rocks there that really contrasts with the grey rock that's there. And so yeah, I kind of stood in the water and waited for the receding tide to come back, and
that's a very unique image, Dylan. It really is.
Yeah,
I love those greens. So good.
Yeah, and they're pretty striking to see as well, particularly on a because I've been there on an evening where there was golden light, and even though that's a, you know, as I say, that's what I usually go out to try and shoot, I couldn't make this work when there was kind of like golden direct sunlight on it, because you don't really see any of this of these colors that are there popping. So that's on North Island, the west coast of North Island, which is, I think, very unique and almost as good as the west coast of South Island. I guess this is also one of my favorite experiences. This was, I think, did okay in the Anzac, got shortlisted for the finals for one of the particular years. And the best thing about it was that if you don't mind taking some steps, it's not that far a walk from the car park. So it's probably about 1,500 steps up to the top, a few hours work, and you're at these tarns. The sad thing about it is that I think the surrounding area, since I've been there, has been quite trashed. It was already looking a little bit dodgy when I was there. So now there's a boardwalk around it to protect it. So it's probably one of the unfortunate victims of popularity, that spot, that people haven't looked after it.
I took my very, very first selfie there about 20 years ago with an old grainy black and white film and a tripod.
Yeah.
A solo walk. Yeah.
I've heard stories of people climbing all the way up there too and not getting anything either. So I'm sure that's
you got to get conditions right. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, with this particular shot, it was a cloudy afternoon. So Taranaki was not visible at all until the very last minute at sunset, where everything just cleared and stayed cleared for the next morning. And then as I was walking down off the mountain, it was just a rainy day the rest of the day. So very, very changeable conditions up there.
That mountain has claimed more than 50 lives.
Wow. People trying to summit it.
Largely, I think it's
been some volcanic slides. I think didn't it? Yeah,
it's pretty steep.
Pyroclastic flow.
Very unforgiving, and it's very exposed, and it's very unpredictable, the weather at the top.
Yeah.
And it's very isolated on its own. It's an unusual kind of.
Yeah, it is. Like if you look at the topography, all around is just flat pasture land. There's no range in sight. This one here is, and I guess an interesting photo because yeah, that's right. So the Emerald Lakes from Tongariro Crossing. It was not good conditions. Another one of those trips where I did it basically just for the experience. So I hiked in from the western side, which is about an 8K hike in to this particular spot, and the conditions were for blizzard type conditions at the top, and they weren't lying. It was probably blowing 80 to 100 Ks up there. So I was hiding in rocks for a lot of the time, and there was zero visibility. But then once again, there were just brief windows in the wild conditions where things were visible.
That's keen, Dylan. It's pretty wild up there, mate.
That. Yeah, and look, I remember a Daniel Corden shot of him in a fog bow in ice. I don't know if you follow Daniel Corden's work, but
definitely do.
I had the same conditions for this particular shot on the way down, where a moment of sun came through, but I couldn't move my hands at the time, so I couldn't get to the camera to take a shot. So I was like, I know what those conditions are like.
Dang.
So yeah, it was very.
I got a few. I won't talk about it now, but I got a few pretty gnarly stories from solo crossings up there in all sorts of conditions.
Yeah, Tongariro. It's on Red Hill. Yeah, Red Hill. It was pretty sketchy up there. Well, that's from South Australia. I won't go that. I thought I'd mention this one. This is one of, I think, our last trip where Marianne and I went without the kids in 2015. And the thing I really like about this shot was, again, that...
Yeah, I haven't seen it from that angle much.
Yeah, and the really fascinating thing about this is that Marianne took this shot, and before the trip, we thought, look, let's do an experiment. You've heard nothing about Carragini. Let's have you not look at any pictures of Carragini and see what you come home with. And so she'd not seen a picture of Sparples. I don't know how I managed to keep the pictures of Sparple out of her line of sight.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, so she hadn't seen anything, and so she went there and took this shot. And I thought, wow, I've not seen that angle before. So,
either.
That's great. And also the colors are, often people just push the reds to the max. You don't really see the blues so much. I also love the love heart sort of shape in the back. I don't know
definitely.
if many people get because they're so close. So
cool. And I think one of the main things about the rocks in that area was the contrast between the blue and the red. So I think we tried to bring that out in this particular picture.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I'd need to keep encouraging, doing little nods to Marianne to get back into landscape photography. And later that year, look, I put this one up there because it's I guess this is a composite. So it was actually clear skies that morning, and the skies were from the same trip taken from a dawn at the Pinnacles down in the Grampians. And I don't usually do composites at all, but I guess it's one of those things where I can appreciate what it's done, but usually if I'm going to do it, I'll tell people you're not looking at a genuine scene. So this one's one of the rare times I've gone purely into an artistic outcome.
Autograph.
That's right, the autograph.
I've heard that term. The depth in this image is just exquisite, Dylan. Like, you just follow this so far down to the frame so beautifully.
Yeah, and it was a very, very cold morning, but somehow there wasn't a lot of ice on those rocks. It was just on the trees in the distance. So I think that really added that texture to the background that was really amazing to watch. And then the warm light kind of filling it from gradually coming up from the right. It was a great morning up there, but very, very cold.
Dylan, we've probably got about another sort of 10, 15 minutes or so. So
I better speed up.
Just to keep an eye on the time, just so we don't. I'd love to do a marathon with all these, mind you. But
I get to your Tassie stuff from this year, mate.
Well, why don't we focus on that? Well, shall we go fast forward to the time of COVID?
Oh, I don't want to rush, Dylan.
No, I think we just page through them and maybe just have a quick look for a few seconds and stop on things.
You go into a lot of trouble to prepare this.
So this picture brings up another theme in photography. So I had seen a similar kind of shot, but I hadn't seen it with car trails before, or so I thought. You guys heard the term comp stomping, yeah?
And who runs it? Does anybody know who runs it?
Yeah.
I know the page. Yeah, no, he's talking about comp stomping generally, I think, Paul.
In general, yeah. So.
Oh, sorry.
The term, yeah.
So what had happened was immediately before this shot, there was a photographer who we thought had comp stomped one of Marianne's shot from the Otways. And then immediately afterward, I put out this shot. And it turns out that Elio Locardi had taken almost exactly the same shot. So you could well have accused me of comp stopping him, though I wasn't actually aware that he'd taken almost the same shot. So I'm much more lax in my attitude now about potential comp stomping because I think if you've got photographers going to the same scene and there's a good composition, there's a fairly moderate or to high likelihood that you might see things the same way. So you use
an ND for that one, Dylan?
No, this was taken
really, really late light.
Yeah, it was pre-dawn, and there weren't any cars, so I did this myself. So I synced my watch with the remote, And then when it was time to start the exposure, I drove off for a minute, and then I synced it for the next exposure and the time lapse back and drove back. So that's how that shot came about, because no one was on the road at the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was good fun doing that. I've done it a couple of times. I did it in the Flinders again in 2020.
Jeez, that's clever. I never would have thought of that.
I would have thought of it, but just the idea of leaving my camera there on its own just freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah. It was for 3 minutes. It was for 3 minutes.
Look, so lucky. Look at that. Oh my God.
Look at this is a shot to I guess it's a bit of a tribute to Dale from DK, because it's the only time that I've met him, and it was just by chance. He was in Queenstown at the time when I was in Glenorchy, and there was this forecast for a G7 event, so we both headed out. And I also met Troy from Undersoul Photography here as well, who was just starting out. So it was a good time. We had a chat. Well, this is just one of a time-lapse shot while we had a bit of a yarn while it was going at the time, but sad to hear of Dale's passing, and hope Carly and Bub are doing well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said.
So this is more locally from a place called Parsons Beach down south, which is another go-to location for dramatic seascapes. And in 2016, Lake Selene, not the most well-known of alpine lakes in Tassie, but I was up here with Francois, and we were both enjoying the light up here. Luke, well, I think you and Tim were shooting Geryon from down below.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could just say a bit about the background, but we were initially trying to do the Western Arthurs, which we managed to do, I think, the following year.
Yeah.
But we actually got skunked, I guess, by the fires. We tried our very best to get into the southwest, but the fires were keeping the area closed, and so we decided to go the Labyrinth instead, and that turned out really, really well. It was beautiful. Yeah.
And in fact, we had to hightail it out from there as well, because the fires were coming in.
There was fires coming up from near Cradle. So
so that was a very, very memorable trip and experience. And also later in that trip, it bucketed down afterwards, didn't it? And really filled the streams up. So this is from KI of the jetty. Kind of at the certain right time of the year, you can get the sun lining up for that at old Kingscote jetty. And another shot from Manham, just with a bit of a manipulation for fun. So I tried, whenever I do manipulations, I try not to just do straight out reflections. I try to make people think what's actually going on. So that's actually the real bank on the right, but obviously the water's reflected. This is a shot that I think represents the difference between what others seek in photography and what I enjoy in photography. Because when I got this shot, I was really jet lagged. It was the first day we've arrived in Banff, and it was a rainy, cold morning. So it wasn't a lot of emotional experience attached to this particular image. But I knew that when I took the shot, it would be the kind of shot that other people would like, but it didn't really say that much to me. I mean, I like it, but probably not as much as other people subsequently liked it. And it comes back to that thing Nick was saying earlier about color being a feature of my images. So these are conditions that, while I enjoy, aren't really exactly the conditions I'm going out to shoot. I certainly love seeing these conditions too, but it's certainly not primarily what I'm going out to shoot, even though I can appreciate it.
I think it's the sort of image too that would probably get more appreciated present day than probably when you took it as well. Just people seem to have been a bit more refined in what they appreciate, rather than the big sort of slam in your face, bright saturated scenes. So
yeah, that's right.
Is that Mount Rundle?
It is. It's taken from Vermilion Lakes and just outside of Banff.
Beautiful.
And this was a random find as well. I just went exploring down in K Country, Kananaskis County, down in Canada in 2016. And I came across this stream overlooking Mount Kidd. I was actually looking for another famous composition that Chip Phillips have taken quite a few shots of. But in the end, I just did some fortuitous exploring and found this scene, which I'm keen to go back to someday when we can go back to Canada.
It's so beautiful there. Goodness
yeah. And it takes us back to, look, I'm going to say 2017 Arthur's trip is still my favorite trip of all time.
Well, that's a big endorsement.
Yeah, definitely.
I was there as well. And it was actually, I have to say about those two trips, the labyrinths and that, I think you mentioned at the time, it was the first time that out of all of the photography you'd done that you'd actually gone out with someone that wasn't Marianne. So first, we were very grateful that she'd let you do that, but also it was quite an honor to be able to share that time with you and get to know you better too. So it was
no, those are definitely good times. And I think the bonus on this was the 6-pack of beer front, so I lucked up earlier. That's amazing. But anyway, so this is taken pretty much at the top of Alpha Moraine, heading towards Mount Hesperus on the first dawn of our trip, where the light was passing over. And this was on the tail end of some pretty ordinary weather that holed us up in a tent for a good 24 hours, wasn't it? And then we headed up and for these scenes for the following sunset and sunrise the next day. So good. Definitely my favorite experience. This is the
doing exposure blends on those, or?
Yeah, I think definitely this one was an exposure blend.
Yeah, I was just looking at those files too, and you would have had to have exposure blended that too. That's the raw sun you can see there, just behind that dark cloud there. So you would have just handled it very well. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is 5 exposures because it was pretty hard to capture that in one. And I don't think I used any filters for this shot either, because it would have just created a funny line across the middle of the scene.
Really hard managing flares, I've found there. You have to really be on the ball with covering the
putting your finger and things. Yeah,
and you don't notice it, and then you look at your shots later and you're like, oh damn, that's going to take a while to get rid of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, clone stamp.
That's why you need a black card for that too. Actually, it'd be very good.
So Lake Bonny is a place I would like to go visit more often, but it's a shot that featured in Ben Good's, a location that featured in Ben Good's really awesome shot
Reflector.
From the
that he just got third and
that's right. Yep. So it's funny enough, he asked me about where to shoot a certain set of trees and he couldn't find them, so he just he settled for that location where he took that shot. So it's a pretty good settling. Yeah, that's right.
Good settle.
No, he certainly made the most of it, and it's a great shot. But you can get some amazing conditions there, particularly when it's still.
Where is it?
It's about 2.5 hours north of Adelaide, heading more towards the New South Wales side of the border.
Towards Mildura.
Yep. So northeast of Adelaide.
Armora.
Yep. I put this is a picture of Noosa during a family holiday where I did lose my A7R2, unfortunately. So
I didn't hear about that one.
Too traumatic. It wasn't killed by a wave. Afterwards it just it fell off my tripod because I hadn't attached it, and then it just fell into a pool of water. So it wasn't even in the midst of crazy action.
Well, I guess with the amount of travel and places you go, I mean, there's going to be some collateral damage, isn't there? At some point?
Definitely. We had a bit of a rough run. And I reckon that the best New Zealand trip we had was in 2017. And the girls by this stage were, 4 and 7. And so they were starting to really be involved, get over the tantrum phase and so forth, and really start to engage with doing day walks and so forth. So that was one of our favorite family trips. And I guess this shot of the Wanaka tree and also has some posterity value to it, because I think someone's vandalized that
they have
branch as well.
Been cut off. Look, it really doesn't look anywhere near as attractive as it used to, unfortunately.
But yeah,
a bird in there too or something.
Yep, there's a bird in there as well. And I've got a print of it at the back there that has a smudge, so I had to redo it for a client. So I put it up somewhere. It looks really good on print. And also had these. I met Trent Bloomfield on this trip as well. He was photographing the highway with the light trails that I did, and he got an amazing shot. But down at Tasman Lake, it was simply unbelievable down there with the reflections of the ice. and of course the starfish on Motukiki. Yeah. And I guess the fondest memory of this one, not only for the image, is that we've got a video of Jamie and Charlotte doing a self-improvised dance there, and we always bring it up on family videos. I'm sure that's something that's going to show up in their 18th and 21st. It's hilarious. So yeah, that I linked that very closely to this particular shot.
Beautiful.
I give credit to Jake Anderson for making this shot possible. I haven't heard much from Jake of late.
No, I think he's gone back into his construction work and focusing on that. But I do recognise the location, and I can't recall you going down there, but it's magic, isn't it?
Yeah. So we went there at the tail end of a conference where it was our 10-year wedding anniversary. So he took us there in November on an 11-degree day. So it was absolutely freezing down there, but still just being overcast, it made it a little bit easier photographically. But this is at the bottom of Sheep Dip Canyon in Rocky Creek. Yeah. So
how fun is that going through there?
So good. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really a world-class landscape photography location in there. It's really quite remarkable. I'd love to do a story, an episode on it, but I don't know if it's appropriate or not. But it's just a completely magic place.
Yeah, but this spot and then further downstream is just simply amazing. This shot makes me grateful for the health I have, because I have been struggling with abdominal pain for quite a while before the shot from Manganui. And at the top of that hike was when I realized there was something quite wrong, because every step I took on my right leg, I just had unbearable pain in my abdomen. And it turns out I was septic from a burst appendix. And I've been delaying presenting to hospital because I just thought it was some kind of gastro or something like that. So, down here somewhere is Manganui. I was not at Manganui, Tauranga Hospital, where I spent 3 days getting an emergency appendectomy and recovering, and then hobbling around to. I had planned to do Tongariro again, but this is taken from the roadside. So I did a bit of plan B and looked at what could be interesting from the roadside. So this is from the desert section outside Tongariro. And it's as far as I could go, really. It was like 50, 100 meters from the roadside. So I kind of hobbled my way and watched this amazing dawn over Mount Doom.
Looks like it's got a lot of aerial potential, Paulie, through around there.
I reckon it does, because if you look at Google Maps, it's pretty amazing.
I don't think it's got a lot of terrain height, but it's if you get down low and tight, I think so.
Yeah. And similarly, so this is Three Sisters, but with and at the time, I think I was using the Laowa 12mm. So you could get really wide images, and this is an example of the changing landscape, I guess. The Three Sisters were now 2.
Have you tried their 9mm? The Laowa 9?
No, I haven't. How's that?
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
Ridiculously
wide. Full frame 9mm rectilinear.
I bet you couldn't use filters with that.
Oh, you actually can.
Oh, you can?
They've got a ring for it. Yeah, unbelievably, they do. They're the larger size, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I just thought I'd put this in because interesting experience going. It's the first time we went to any kind of tropical islands, and we went to Fiji. There were tidal waves at the time. So we were standing on an embankment, and at times the water came up over the embankment from here. And when it went out, all of this was exposed again. So it's just incredible. I hadn't seen kind of tides like that before. It's in retrospect, a bit dangerous to be out there trying to photograph, but certainly it was dramatic.
It's a bit scary, right?
Yeah. Manor Falls again, slightly different, not quite the same yin yang as before. And in late 2018, we managed to get ourselves to Vancouver Island, which is definitely a location I want to visit more.
Yeah, I want to go there.
And Adam Gibbs, there's a lot of amazing shots from there, and Gavin Hardcastle, all of those guys hail from those parts, and I've just been very inspired by their images and so forth from there. So endless opportunities to explore. So this is taken from, I think, Fairy Lake, it's called. and Sandcut Falls, also in Vancouver Island. So this amazing kind of seaside waterfall.
Yeah.
And it just takes us to some of the Tassie trips. So I'm not a natural one for heights, but so I kind of sat here for a little bit while Luke was doing more daring things that I found him doing. I think further back, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I was around. Was I around the other side? I can't remember, but
yeah, you were. I saw you sitting on a ledge, and I thought, I'm not going down there.
I think I ended up losing those pictures anyway, so that's great to know, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It was an interesting. I think you forgot to bring the poles in your tent too.
Oh,
so we ended up bunking it, but it's fine. I had a 2-man, so it was all good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Cape Rowell was definitely a great place to shoot, and direct inspiration from Nick, because I'm pretty sure I'd seen an image of yours from here.
Yeah.
But I think in that cramped up spot, I couldn't find much different a composition to shoot.
It's a very obvious composition, whether you shoot it with the long exposure or not. Yeah, all the really nice shots I've seen from there are long exposure shots, and this is another magic one. It's 200 meters tall, that cliff. You are literally on the edge of a 200 meter tall cliff. So it's very, you do not shoot here if it's windy.
Yeah, that's right.
If anyone's watching, this is a precarious position. It's not to be mucked around with.
No, and it was luckily when I went there with Luke, it was dry and not particularly windy.
Same when I shot there as well.
Yeah.
Wind, just the tripod vibrations alone would just be so frustrating.
Yeah. And likewise for the blade at Cape Pillar, there's a little alcove I took this from, where I was at least a little bit sheltered and a bit more secure. But I've seen some shots where I think people have just stood up right at the top at the end there, and there was no way I was doing that, given how big the drop off was. But the Capes was simply an amazing experience, and this is really the last kind of bit of, I guess, wilderness or solo hiking that I've done for a long time. I haven't done anything since that trip, really.
Oh wow!
This is kind of special for us because I took some of my in-laws who weren't really into hiking up here.
Oh, and they must have thanked you after going up Mount Amos.
Yeah, that's right. Very dry conditions, so no one slipped on the way down.
Oh, it's a prick of a walk.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And the following morning it was scheduled to be clear, and it started off clear, and I started heading up there, and all of a sudden a rain band came while I was halfway up the mountain. So I had to kind of abort on the way down and just I had to bum slide my way down and went to Sleepy Bay instead. But it was pretty scary when the rain came. I'm like, this is I did not anticipate this, and sure enough, everywhere else it was fine. It was just this little concentrated.
It definitely likes to hold its own cloud up there from the convection or whatever it's doing.
Yeah. Later that year, we went to Vanuatu, and I think Luke, you shot this particular volcano.
Yasur,
yeah, and it is in the Tanna, is it? The island of Tanna, so I think you shot it probably when it was at a higher activity level.
Possibly, but yeah, I think I didn't get anything quite like what you've got there, but that's not a surprise. I remember we got some. I'll never forget. Actually, we got hit by some of the volcanic gases, and it actually dissolved the front coating on our lenses.
Yeah. So I remember you told me about that, and I thought, right, I'm going to put a sacrificial old UV filter on here. And unfortunately, the conditions were good enough to get this shot, but not bad enough to damage our equipment. And we have another memorable video of here with Jamie shouting out volcanoes, spew us some lava, and then it did it right at that moment. So
it's to be standing on the rim of an active volcano, and it's only a few hours flight from Brisbane, really.
It is
quite remarkable how close you can actually get to a volcano, and I don't think people realize how little. Well, it's a second flight again to get to Tanna, but it's pretty close, really.
And staying in Tanna was a really refreshing experience as well, because there's so little infrastructure there. We were basically in a hut room and doing bucket showers and things like that. So it's a good experience for the kids just to get out and experience something different accommodation wise. Yeah, all good.
And
this is our last kind of overseas trip, and then we did bit of an ocean. At this time, COVID was hitting, and then it shut down everything. So for 2020, I've shown you a lot of the South Australia stuff, so I might skip over a lot of that because it's probably in the previous episode. But this one was just fortuitous timing at the King's Coast jetty.
What's happening there in the back, Dylan? Is it just a beam of...
That's from Cape Jarvis Lighthouse.
Oh wow!
Across, yeah. So it's a lighthouse beam from across Backstairs Passage. Wow. So just the really fortunate timing with the Milky Way and the positioning of it.
And that's the Adelaide light pollution there. In
in the far distant background. Yeah.
Wow. I really want to shoot that jetty. It's definitely want to get there.
Yeah, if you do, it's a good one to shoot at high tide because at low tide the rocks are not particularly attractive there. And then so I did a lot of exploring of more remote beaches on the north coast there, which is ideal for winter because that's where the light strikes. And then later that year we explored the Flinders. So I think we've gone through some of these before. So I'll just skip over them. And then this year the major experience we had was being able to travel interstate again. And so a lot of by now from the Flinders trip, the really good thing about the evolution of our trips was that the girls managed to do a 10K kind of return hike during the day. So they were getting more accustomed to hiking. So in Lamington National Park, we were actually able to do a lot of the waterfall loops and things with the girls in tow. So didn't have to rush things along, just took things easy. But this is at Moran's Falls, which is very close to the O'Reilly's Rainforest Retreat. And so I think it's worth staying there, even if you're camping or using the resort, because otherwise the road in from O'Reilly's is so winding and at least an hour in from the nearest town that it's a bit of a long haul to get there from anywhere really. So highly recommended to stay there if you can.
I have to pick your brain on that because I'm heading over there next month actually to do some shooting. So
we might see you there. We're in April.
All right.
Yeah, so with Marianne's extended family, so hopefully we can show some of this stuff. But feel free to talk. There's so many good walks there.
Yeah, wow.
And one of the trips that the girls really enjoyed was going out to Heron Island, swimming with the turtles and seeing the hatchling eruptions and things at the right time of year. So so this trip was largely planned around the phenomenon of turtles laying their eggs and hatchlings coming out, so that they could see that. And we were fortunate to see a hatchling eruption of several hundred of them just pop out the ground and dash to the sea. So
very nice.
Is that a particular time of year that happens?
Around March.
Okay.
So around March you can catch the tail end of the nesting season.
Not far off then.
Yep, and then some of they're doing the nesting now, but the hatchlings start to erupt around early March.
And
so you might
come out of the beach.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you catch both if you had that. And then we had a good wet winter around South Australia. So in between the last podcast and now, I took a lot of the Adelaide waterfalls, which I think they look completely different in high flow than normal. Particularly kind of Morialta Falls, which really gives you a bit of an outback feel to it with all the canyons and things there. So it's a really amazing location to shoot.
Basically, the suburbs of Adelaide. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So 5 minutes. Maybe 10-minute walk in from the nearest road, which is suburban Adelaide. Which takes us to the most recent.
I saw that and I thought, what the hell time of day did he get up? And why did it take to get up there? It was freezing cold.
Well, it was so the night before we went up with the kids to play in the snow, and as a side scouting mission, I just wanted to see where the road was closed, and fortunately it was closed at the springs and not further down. So I was able to drive up to the springs at probably around lucky. Yeah, it was about 3:30 in the morning, and then hiked up the Ice House track to South Wellington, and then came up that way to this particular spot.
Huge champion.
So it was good because I've never been to South Wellington, but I'd certainly seen Luke's shot of the Rocking Stone with Aurora, so I kind of knew which angle it faced, and so it was one of those things where the planning kind of went right, and the only thing that went wrong that morning was my tripod being wet from a shoot at Secret Falls the night before. So when I got up there, it was completely frozen.
Oh,
And in order to unstick it, I used my drinking water to kind of just melt the ice off. And then so I got my gloves wet, and so the hands were just dying.
Oh.
So anyway, but it was a lot of fun getting here. But finding the rocking stone was challenging in the snow.
and it would have been hard to not
Slippery as
get in
hell.
your own shot there too with your footprints. You did pretty well.
Yeah, so I walked around trying not to get in, but I don't know how high these rocks usually are when there's not snow.
They're pretty tall, yeah.
Yeah, I'd imagine they wouldn't be the easiest to get up to, but because I was certainly falling through at certain points quite far. Yeah,
I spent a bit of a night there, and I know them quite well after that.
Yeah. So we did I think probably the hike that the kids, apart from the snow that they experienced, I think the hike that they enjoyed the most was going to Bastion Cascades, because that was the most adventurous in terms of basically doing a nature's obstacle course for them. And Nick had warned us about a particular part about climbing up a small rope, and true enough, we missed the turnoff. We kept going on down the creek, and so this must be the bit
I did the same thing.
Yeah. And on the backtrack up, we saw
there's
the rope.
a really bad sign there that makes it look like you have to go straight ahead. Yeah.
It's actually a good spot down straight ahead. I took some shots from where that path ended, but this is just from exploring all the creeks around the terminus at Bastion Cascade. So that trip was particularly good as a family trip, because, as I said, I did a lot of the morning aspects of the photography, and then we were able to do a long day hike, and then basically afternoon and evening was chill out time. And I don't think I really shot any sunsets apart from when I was on the north coast in the evening. So that's kind of settled into our kind of family trip routine, even locally as well. And it's kind of met with a good balance of keeping everyone happy, as well as getting the exploration vibes going as well. So I have a lot more from that trip I'd like to show, but I've kind of kept it minimal. And there's just an updated scene from another new favourite spot on the south coast here, South Australia. So that's Deep Creek Cove, and the boulders there, the dramatic cliffs are really something I could just keep going back to and explore every year.
Check it out. I've seen it on the map there. Never got down there. So.
Yeah, it takes a bit of a mission, because it's either a steep 2K hike there or a flatter 3K hike there from campgrounds and things. So it's definitely a worthwhile one, but really for direct light only in the summer months, because it faces south. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's so where I'm at with photography at the moment. It's really, I've stopped doing a lot of shooting locally, because with the work in the hospital and with the kids' growing commitments over the weekend, I just don't have the available time to be heading out for dawn shoots and things. So nearly all of the shoots and shots that come back with are on either family holidays locally or interstate and abroad. So in the lead up to those things, in the lead up to those holidays, I'm really trying to look at what are the possibilities, and how am I going to maximize my time while I'm at those sites, in order to get some things for the kids to do during the day, as well as for myself photographically in the morning before everyone gets up.
So much coordination.
It is. And, I think one of the shots I didn't show that was a really nice find was Projection Bluff as well in Tassie. Yep. I didn't really come across any photos there, but it looked like a nice hike. So I just went up in the morning, and it's really amazing up there. I'm sure a lot of places would be like that in Tassie, but it was certainly one of the fonder memories. Same with Mother Cummings Peak. So.
Yep, you've done a couple of hikes there that other people just don't do for dawn. So I've never seen any shots from either of those locations at dawn. So well done.
And that means a lot coming from Nick.
Yeah, thanks. And it's I think really I had a lot of fun, like just finding myself slightly off trail and using navigation to get myself back on track and finding the right path and so forth. And I didn't show I'll just show you the one shot, Nick, because you thought I may have taken some shots from up on Mount Murchison, but I really only took one. because it was so blustery out there, and I'd really got my satisfaction out of just being up there. So if I can find it, I'll just briefly show it to you.
Just have to share your screen again there, mate.
Yep,
I
I
think
just
he's
have to
looking
find
for
it
on his
yeah.
in his files.
Oh yeah, here we go. So just to finish up on
Oh,
yeah, so that's it was basically whiteout conditions going up there, and part of the reason why I went up Mount Murchison, apart from the fact that it looked like an awesome climb, and I love doing climbs. I think it's about 600 meters, 650 meters elevation in about 1.5 Ks or something like that. So it was those are the kinds of hills I like doing locally, where I can find steep slopes just for the fun of it. Yeah, so there was a great experience doing that. And at the top, there was very limited shelter. But I also did it partly because if I ever make it down there during Vegas season, I wondered what it might be like up there in Vegas season. And now I guess having done it, I'm fairly confident that I could do another in-out trip at any time of the day, knowing the lay of the land.
And that's a wonderful shot, mate. For something where you didn't take your camera out too much, you've captured a shot that I'm very, very fond of. I love that. That's the first time I've seen it. So
yeah, so it's the one shot I took. I thought this is a one-shot challenge. I'm going to try and make it count.
You made it count, mate. That's absolutely beautiful work. Well done.
yeah, and that says a lot about your style in general, Dylan. How much commitment you put in, and it's all for the love and the passion, of course. But you know, you still have to look back on it as some pretty serious work that you're doing. And I mean, I can only imagine what you've probably still got in your archives. Although you are extremely good at getting your work out there once you've finished a trip. So it's always very clear that you've been away doing something, because you'll see the beautiful cascade of images coming through, and maybe a video or two as well. So yeah, so no, thanks. And we'll probably have to leave it there. It's just been an amazing show of just top-notch photography, and yeah, we just really appreciate your time today and showing us your work there, and a bit about your background. And I think, you know, what makes you so unique is being able to balance a very high quality output in photography with a demanding job and a beautiful family as well, and making it all work. So there's no mean feat, and we didn't even talk about articles about you you know, carrying your children around on backpacks and
you know what I thought, look, since I'm here, why don't we just I'm just going to tell this one last story. This is an article from 7 years ago on Board Panda, and the claim to fame about it is that I told you guys the story before, but Marianne has a celebrity crush on Chris Evans, who's Captain America, and Captain America leaked this article on his personal Instagram, saying these parents got it right. And so there's all these comments saying Captain America brought me here. So she has kept a screenshot of that tweet. I think it was Twitter, of that tweet from his, and kept it framed. So, but yeah, Board Panda from 7 years ago. We did write a lot of articles on how to travel with family.
Yeah, well done, mate. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And if people want to see your work, you're still obviously putting out plenty of shots on your Instagram and Facebook and that kind of thing as well. So definitely, and you're still using the name Everlook too, of course, aren't you?
Definitely.
So do look up Everlook, and you know, as Dylan mentioned, it's been a bit more of a struggle for him to get out, but this doesn't mean that there's any reduction in quality when it does. So definitely worth following, and I'm sure many of you are already. Thanks so much again, Dylan. Gents, any final remarks?
Just thanks, Dylan, for all the incredible work you're doing for the community. You know, we didn't even get really to touch on the kind of impact it's had on you, and the workload and the stress of 2 years of COVID, and what kind of extra stresses you've been under. And just want to acknowledge you and thank you. You know, just on behalf of all people. I can't even imagine what that's been like, mate.
It's been a I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of it from our point of view. We've been able to see teams kind of galvanize together where previously they were at each other and so forth, and all for the greater good, I guess. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's really good to kind of talk and get your kind of informal feedback about some of these shots as well, and hear different opinions.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's always a pleasure to see your face and catch up with you when you're down here in Tassie. And it's been really great that you've come on tonight and shown us your absolutely magnificent work. So thanks, buddy.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I tried to catch you on that last time, but I just missed you. Next time, mate.
Yeah, definitely. There will certainly be a next time.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, on that note, thanks for joining us, Dylan, and we'll see you all very soon. Good night.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks
See
again,
you.
Dylan.
Bye.